public funds are frankly ridiculous. Kwasi Kwarteng's comments follow reports that rebels are threatening to publish secret text messages and recordings from the Prime Minister's supporters.
Any idea that the Whip's office have this in their gift, I think should be challenged immediately. And clearly, if these allegations are true, that's a very, very serious allegation, and I'd want to see them properly investigated.
Kwasi Kwarteng. A 26-year-old who was obsessed with the devil is facing life in prison for killing one woman and attacking two others in the space of 4 hours. Brian Sengendo killed a 44-year-old woman in North London last August. Earlier the same night, he targeted two other women. He's been found guilty of 7 charges, including murder, attempted murder, kidnap and rape. The judge praised police for catching a potential serial killer. He'll be sentenced in March. A suspected drug trafficker has been arrested in Spain just days after he was named as one of the UK's most wanted. 30-year-old Joshua Hendry was caught in Marbella in southern Spain after an off-duty police officer recognised him from the publicity. He's alleged to have trafficked heroin and cocaine from Liverpool to Grimsby. Entertainment news and Cher, Brian May and Bonnie Tyler are among some of the stars paying tribute tonight to the US rock singer Meat Loaf, who's died at the age of 74. Career which spanned 6 decades and saw him sell over 100 million albums with hits like that, I'd Do Anything for Love, and of course the infamous Bat Out of Hell. He also forged a career in the movies, starring in 65 films, including The Rocky Horror Picture Show and Wayne's World. On TV, online and on your radio through DAB+, you're with GB News. Now back to Mark Dolan and Tonight.
It's Friday, the 21st of January. We've got a brilliant show lined up for you. Great to see you again. I have missed you. Lovely to have your company. Now, on the big question, as a growing number of scientific and media figures appear to do a U-turn over COVID measures, were the lockdown skeptics right all along? I'll put that to the author of the best-selling book all about COVID measures, A State of Fear, Laura Dodsworth, infectious disease expert Dr. Bharat Pankania, and Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, head of medicine at Stanford Medical School in California, and co-author in 2020 of the Great Barrington Declaration, which advocated letting the virus spread in low-risk groups with focused protection for those most at risk. They all take a different view, so that's guaranteed to be a lively discussion. Don't miss the big question at 9:20. My Mark Meets guest is an icon of British sport, former British Olympic swimmer Sharron Davies, who followed retirement from the sport into a successful career as a TV presenter and fitness guru. Sharron and I will talk about success in the pool, the current state of British swimming, and whether trans women should participate in female sport. Sharron has well-reported strong views on that, and we'll hear all of them at 10 o'clock. My big opinions coming up. There are too many people who don't want this pandemic to end. I'll also hear the big opinions of my amazing panel tonight, including author and entrepreneur making a welcome return to the show, Rebecca Jane, and writer and commentator, a very good and old friend of mine, Benedict Spence. Plus another great British game show and After 11 headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 top comedians reflecting on tomorrow's newspaper front pages. So a big 3 hours to come with a few surprises along the way. This programme's all about the unexpected, including another instalment of We Feel Your Pain. In the spotlight tonight, we'll be reaching out to TV host Jeremy Vine. That's right, Jeremy has blocked GB News' very own Liam Halligan on Twitter. We'll find out why. We Feel Your Pain is coming at 10 o'clock, and you won't want to miss it. Now, the highlight of my show is when you get in touch. You know I love getting your emails, so drop me a line right now and throughout the show, mark@gbnews.uk. We've got a lively one, and remember, we don't do boring, not on my watch. It's Friday night, the weekend starts here. Crack open a bottle of something dangerously cold from the fridge, or fire up the kettle, tear open the custard creams, and let's get to work. An amusing cartoon appeared in the New Yorker magazine this week. Take a look at this. It's quite interesting. And you'll have a look at the illustration. And it's simply a group of guests who are on an aeroplane. And they're somehow having an issue with the flight. It's quite a fascinating exchange, I think you will agree. But there's more to this particular characterization than meets the eye. Because you'll notice that within this message, and take a look at this, there's a guy at the front of the plane. He's got his hand in the air. And he says, "These smug pilots have lost touch with regular passengers like us. Who thinks I should fly the plane? Who thinks I should fly the plane?" So you got this idea that there's a passenger that thinks that he can fly the plane because he's had enough of smug pilots. Well, there you go. Pretty amusing stuff. Or is it? Because behind this humour is a message that we've heard from the COVID zealots since day one. You're not a scientist. Show me your degree in epidemiology. I'd rather listen to a scientist than an actor, a journalist, a stand-up comedian, or an ordinary, unqualified man or woman in the street. The message in that cartoon is one that we've had throughout the pandemic. Don't question, just obey. Stay at home, wear a mask, get the jab. Don't ask questions, stay in your lane and shut up. For 2 years, those who questioned the effectiveness of COVID measures and drew attention to their colossal damage, which is beyond debate, have been called dangerous. That's right, for the first time in history, it's now dangerous to question government policy. People kept awake at night worrying about the impact of COVID measures and doubtful of their efficacy have been called heartless, granny killers, and worst of all, right-wing. Why is a concern about wrecking people's lives, economic damage, closed schools, and covering people's faces against their will right-wing? Why is worrying about a colossal non-COVID death toll right-wing? Well, it's not right-wing, is it? It's just a way of putting you down, of closing out the debate and shutting you up. It's the same way that a triple-vaxxed person who defends the right for somebody not to have the vaccine, well, apparently they're an anti-vaxxer. Wow, you've had 3 jabs and you're an anti-vaxxer. How does that work? It's the same as the right-wing slur, the granny killer, and all the rest of it. It's to put you down and to shut you up. Fear porn has played out on our TV screens in the course of the pandemic. Endless scenes from hospitals, painting just one picture of the coronavirus pandemic. It turns out, according to official ONS data, 17,500 sad deaths were caused from or with COVID where there were no other comorbidities. 17,500 people over the course of almost 2 years. The average age of death, over 80. Dreadful, appalling deaths, of course, and very sad for those involved. But that damning figure is on a par or lower than what we might see from a bad flu season. And we never locked down the country, closed once viable businesses and borrowed £500 billion for the flu. The truth is that it's not just ordinary people like you and me who have been silenced in the course of this pandemic and told to stay in our lane, to do what we're told and to shut up. Leading academics critical of these measures have been silenced too. Or they've silenced themselves, often for fear of attack, reputational damage, the loss of funding and potentially the loss of their job. Which is why the voices supportive of these measures in the world of science have been particularly loud, creating the illusion of a consensus, creating the impression they are the science. Well, not really. They've just bullied everyone else, people like Professor Carl Heneghan of Oxford University, out of the way. Carl Heneghan is not stupid. Jay Bhattacharya, Martin Kulldorff, Sunetra Gupta, they're not stupid people, but they challenge the cosy COVID consensus. For that matter, I'm not stupid. And you're not stupid. The numbers are in, just look at the graphs. Look at the countries that locked down hard and look at those that didn't. And states in America, show me the difference. And where's the evidence that masks made a blind bit of difference? The surgical and cloth masks, of which so many virtue-signalling ideologues are fond, aren't even accepted in Austria or Germany, they don't accept them. Lockdown-loving CNN's chief medical advisor said, do not wear a cloth mask. They are facial furniture. But if you wear one, you're a nice person, apparently. I'm so confused. Meanwhile, that prize numpty, London Mayor Sadiq Khan, has said he will continue the mask mandate on the tubes, even though it has been lifted by central government. London clearly an oasis of communism in an otherwise free country. Some universities and schools have said they will continue with mask mandates. How is that even legal? And the idea that the teaching unions give one fig about the welfare of children who suffer as a result of masks but face scant threat from the virus itself has now come and gone. They don't care about kids. Surely institutions continuing the mask mandate can't enforce them after Parliament scrapped them. High-profile medics continue to preach the mask ideology. So many people jumping on Twitter saying, I will continue to wear my mask. Now, a year ago, I famously chopped up a mask on national radio. Friends and colleagues told me at the time, it's not a hill to die on. It's only a mask. Well, it's now January 2022, and it turns out it was a hill to die on, because some people want this to last forever. They want masks forever. They want social distancing forever. They want work from home orders forever. They want fear forever. They want control forever. That's why it matters. That's why it's all a hill to die on. Closed schools are a hill to die on. They should never have been closed in the first place. Masks are a hill to die on. Work from home orders, stopping healthy people from going to work and paying their bills. Getting people to stay at home on furlough and do nothing. Arrows in supermarkets. Those pathetic glass perspex screens. Endless hand sanitizer, which was debunked ages ago. It's all a hill to die on. Every single COVID measure you can think of has got to go. Lock, stock and barrel now. Vast portions of the media, brainwashed and fearful members of the public, bullying trade unions, partisan medics and scientists are all signed up to the cosy COVID consensus. None of them want this to end. They've now got an appetite for control and for compliance, and they don't want to give it up. But they're losing the battle. In my view, we have reached escape velocity, not from the virus, which will sadly be with us, most likely forever, but from the hellish mechanisms which have caused so much human, economic and societal damage. So it's almost done. Future generations will look back at a disease with a survival rate of over 99% and have a simple question. What the hell were they thinking? But as long as we learn our lessons and finish the job and make sure this isn't repeated, then we can move forward. With two words that must resonate the length and breadth of the country. Never again. I, like many, have doubtless paid a price for asking questions. Broadcasting as I have on the national airwaves in the course of the whole pandemic, hearing the human stories, your stories, of suffering, mental torture, health problems, and personal financial hell, it's been impossible for me not to ask questions. And I've lost friends in doing so, but clearly they weren't friends in the first place. So until this is over and until the needless human suffering stops, I won't shut up. I won't be quiet, and I won't stay in my lane. And neither should you. What's your view? Mark at GBNews.UK. Drop me a line if you agree or if you disagree, and I'll get to your thoughts shortly. But now let's hear the views of my amazing panel, who are here to react to the big stories of the day. Author and entrepreneur Rebecca Jane and writer and commentator Benedict Spence. Rebecca Jane, do you think that many public figures are now doing a bit of a U-turn when it comes to COVID measures?
In some degrees, yes. I think that because essentially they've all been battled into this fear culture, and do you know what? They're getting a bit sick of it now. Whereas a lot of people were quite vocal in the early stages, they are now doing a little bit of a U-turn because they're sick of coming up against confrontation all the time. And I've been exactly the same as you. I've been against this from the beginning. In the beginning, I was a little bit more bought into it, but predominantly throughout the whole thing, I've been against all of it because it's gone against so many human rights, and that's just against everything I believe in. But even for me, I do feel like the constant ammunition that comes back at you when you speak out against this it gets difficult at times. So sometimes you're just like, enough. I had an incident on the train here today with a lady who decided to quiz me on my vaccine status because I wasn't wearing a mask. And, she got both barrels in the nicest possible way. And then I moved and the carriage applauded me.
And rightly so, I'd be applauding,
nice.
but of course many won't, will they, Benedict? I mean, the bottom line is there are many people out there still worried about the virus. There are many in the scientific and medical establishment concerned about hospital capacity. So where do you think we are in the pandemic?
Well, I mean, really, it all depends on how much longer this Prime Minister hangs on for, largely because, as has been shown, all it took for us to sort of get back to a semblance of normal life was for him to live a semblance of his normal life and for the rest of us to find out about it. For as long as he is in place, under the cosh, under pressure, I think that we will begin to edge our way a little bit back towards a semblance of normality. The difficulty is, were he to be in a slightly stronger position or somebody else to replace him, we might end up sort of rowing back to a position where some regulations, for whatever reason, were brought back in. And this is the thing, actually, it doesn't really need an awful lot of justification. As you've pointed out, a lot of people are very worried about the state of the virus. It's not, in fact, just the virus itself that they're worried about. They worry about, the NHS collapsing. They're worried about all sorts of things. And people will use their fears to justify state intervention, regardless of whether or not that state intervention actually has any impact. It's the idea that people are seen to be doing something, and they quite like that. It looks as if everybody's being industrious and helping, regardless of whether or not they actually are. So I think it's nice. It's nice to be taking a few steps in the right direction, albeit as the result of a slightly silly political scandal. But I don't think it's... perhaps I don't quite share your enthusiasm or your confidence, Mark, that we are firmly going in that direction. I think it could slide back in the opposite direction quite easily, frankly.
Well, Benedict, what really bothers me, as I mentioned, I drew attention to that cartoon in the New Yorker. There's a passenger on a plane. He said, I'm sick of the smug pilots. Who wants me to fly the plane? Which I guess is a sort of satirical comment on armchair experts. But I feel that ordinary people, lots of my viewers, have been gaslit in the course of this pandemic. I think everyone is allowed a view because we've all been impacted by these measures. And I don't think, Benedict, you need a degree in epidemiology to have an overview about whether lockdowns work.
No, you don't. And I think anybody who's been paying attention to the arguments around higher education in the UK would be able to tell you that not all degrees and qualifications are necessarily worth the paper that they're written on, but also anybody who has any sort of idea about how the scientific community works, and that's in whatever field it is, knows that actually there is no such thing as consensus, apart from, I don't know, maybe gravity. But, largely you do get people who will argue the case about all sorts of things till the cows come home, and there's very good reason for that. You do need to test hypotheses to breaking point to test whether or not they are true, and that's a good thing. And I think really this is the intersection, if you like, between science and politics in this country, popular politics, where actually adversarial attitudes, quite nasty, pernicious attitudes sort of hit up against each other, and where, you can be, rather than just an inquisitive mind, a questioning individual, you can be painted as a morally bad person for asking questions. And I think that that's something that we're going to have to reconcile ourselves if the world is to become more technologically and scientifically literate. People are going to have to come to terms with that. There are no black and white answers very often when it comes to science, whatever it is, biology, physics, it doesn't really matter. That's the reality, is that there is always shifting sands. And you can't just put things into simple categories of good and therefore morally good or bad. And it just doesn't work that way.
Rebecca, Jane, are my viewers that haven't got a degree in epidemiology allowed opinions about the COVID measures?
Oh, my goodness, yes. Because this isn't about COVID. I honestly, COVID is one thing, but there are so many more other things that are affecting this country because of the measures that have been brought in and because of what has happened with COVID. So their opinions are absolutely and utterly vital. And people have to speak out and they have to keep on doing it because it's our human rights that are in question. And of course, like, you don't need to be a scientific expert to have an opinion that actually there are far bigger issues at play here. For me, mental health obviously is one of them. And just even the small things, you know, it's not just a case of masks. A mask is a constant reminder of the controls that we are under. And all of these little things that are there, it's all a constant reminder and constantly builds this extra level of anxiety.
Lots more from my panel later in the hour. After another week to forget for the Prime Minister, what is the best way to deliver an apology? We'll hear an expert view on that one. But coming up in the big question, have lockdown skeptics been proved right? Or were many more lives saved by ignoring what they had to say? We'll discuss all of that with 3 top experts. But first, the weather. Good evening. It's not as cold out there this evening as yesterday because there's more cloud around. That cloud is going to make for quite a grey weekend for most of us, but a few spots will continue to see a bit of sunshine, and most of us are not going to see any rain thanks to this area of high pressure that's been ambling across the country for the past couple of days and will stick around for much of next week. There are weather fronts approaching the far northwest and across the Highlands, the Western Isles. There will at times be some drizzly rain, certainly through this evening and overnight, but for most it is a dry night, but with a lot of cloud. Still some breaks in the cloud across eastern England, parts of the south, and where those breaks persist, a touch of frost is still going to happen. But for most towns and cities, warmer than last night, that cloud acting like a blanket and keeping temperatures above freezing. That cloud, though, is obviously going to blot out the sun for most of us during Saturday. Parts of eastern England, northeast Scotland, and across parts of the south will see some breaks in the cloud and a bit of sunshine. That cloud, though, quite thick across the Highlands, Argyll and Bute, with some rain at times here. Otherwise, though, most of us will be dry. Temperatures a little higher than today's values, 7, 8. Top temperatures probably northern Scotland, where we could reach 11 or 12 with a bit of brightness, say Caithness and Sutherland or the Moray Firth. Still some patchy rain across the Highlands, the Western Isles during Saturday evening, but elsewhere, if you're heading out tomorrow evening, it should be dry, but again, it will be fairly cloudy. Again, a few pockets of frost possible on Sunday morning, and again, during the day, we'll see a few breaks in the cloud, maybe parts of East Wales, northeast England, northeast Scotland, so some blue sky here. Otherwise, most of us just rather glum but dry. Main exception to that dry weather again, the far northwest, where there'll be some rain and drizzle over the Highlands. Quite breezy all weekend across the northwest, those winds strengthening further on Sunday. Temperatures again 8, 9, 10 Celsius. At times weather fronts will push into the far north, but for most high pressure hangs on even into next week, keeping things largely dry.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
So much more to get through in the next 2.5 hours. Don't forget, headliners at 11. I'll be joined by two top comics looking at tomorrow's papers. But it's time now for the big question, in which we tackle a major story from multiple points of view. Now, the Telegraph journalist Alison Pearson, writing in this week's paper, she wrote the following headline: "I was pilloried for being a lockdown sceptic. Now it's clear I was right about quite a few things." She goes on to write, "When the resistance dared to suggest some lockdown measures were disproportionate, crazy and unsupported by science, let alone common sense, we were reviled. That is no exaggeration. I was called in no particular order a COVID denier. I nursed my entire family through the virus. A granny killer. I didn't see my own mother for 18 months. And a spreader of disinformation. When I protested," she goes on to write, "on social media that putting padlocks on the gates of playgrounds was a terrible idea, back came a fusillade of vicious accusations. You want people to die." To question the official narrative, she writes, that nothing mattered except keeping people safe from COVID was heresy. Witches like me had to be burned at the stake before we could spread our subversive ideas to all sage-fearing people. Funny how things turn out, she says. She concludes it's now widely acknowledged that the NHS was never overwhelmed. That's why the Nightingales were shut without being used. And even those prophets of doom at the BBC finally acknowledged this week that half of COVID deaths, in inverted commas, since Christmas are not from COVID, but with COVID. So, following that article, which has made quite the splash, tonight's big question is a simple one. With many in the media and the scientific community seeming to eat their words about COVID measures and backing off from requesting further lockdowns, have the sceptics of these COVID measures been proven right? Well, to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome three good friends of mine. The author of the best-selling book all about COVID measures and the psychology with which they were executed. The book's called A State of Fear. It's by Laura Dodsworth. We're also joined by Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School, Dr. Bharat Pankhania, who boasts over 20 years of experience in communicable disease control and infectious disease management. And last but not least, live from California, Professor Jay Bhattacharya, Head of Medicine at Stanford Medical School and co-author in 2020 of the Great Barrington Declaration, which advocated letting the virus spread in lower risk groups with focused protection for those most at risk. Wonderful to have all three of you on the show. I'll start with you, Bharat, if I may. Welcome back to the programme. Do you think that the lockdown sceptics have been proved right?
None has been proved right or wrong categorically. This is a grey area for most people. So let's look at it like this. And I want to go back all the way back to 2003 when we were dealing with SARS. When SARS suddenly appeared in Guangdong province in China, next door to Hong Kong, the authorities acted very fast, very extensively, and by putting in measures immediately and very, very extensively, SARS suddenly was controlled and eliminated, and history. Unfortunately, with SARS-CoV-2, those actions were not taken. Furthermore, unfortunately, SARS-CoV-2 was more infectious, more transmissible, and it was allowed to spread. Once you have allowed it to spread, there are very little control measures you can do. So since its arrival in 2019, December-ish time, we have always been playing catch up, and that's the tragedy. So we did need to reduce human-to-human interactions where this thing was spreading, and all those measures.
But Bharat Pankhania, why the lack of a noticeable difference in the outcomes for countries that had strict lockdown measures and mask mandates? Go on.
You were unlikely to get infected and unlikely to pose a threat to anyone. Unfortunately, the people who make these laws, they make it universal, draconian, extensive. And when you make those laws in that fashion, it's very difficult to be sort of flexible, which is, I always said, if you are out and about on your own, on what basis are you going to infect anyone? But those sort of things wouldn't go down well with, they want a law which just says, stay at home, you will stay at home. People like myself never advocated absolute lockdown of that ilk.
Bharat, briefly, before I get to my other guests, what do you think would have been the textbook way to handle this pandemic if you'd been in charge?
Oh, I wish I had been, because my answer would be the the way SARS in 2003 was managed, which was early, extensive actions. And by doing those early, extensive actions, we would have reduced its spread globally, and then we would have been in a much, much better place. Very simple, straightforward medicine. Early, extensive actions would have saved the day.
Now, Bharat, that wasn't possible because of the lies, cover-up and obfuscation from China. So how would you have handled the pandemic as it landed on our doorstep, the problem faced by the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, President Trump in America, Macron in France in March 2020? Where would you have gone from there?
Okay, so I was involved, and so I know. And to relate this to you, our government was distracted by Brexit, which had just happened, and they were so distracted that they didn't see the warning signs coming in from Italy, and they did absolutely nothing to take those warning signs that this virus is now circulating on the ski slopes of Italy. We need to put in control measures. First error. Second error was when it started to circulate extensively, we temporarily completely gave up test and trace, and then there was a pause, and then we invented a centralized test and trace service costing 37 billion or thereabouts, which could have been much, much, much better spent. Then we went on to build Nightingale hospitals, not realizing that we haven't got staff to man these hospitals with complex needs for the patients. And one other big error we made was to make space in the hospitals. We discharged elderly people back to the nursing homes to go back to the hospital and nursing homes and stay there. And unfortunately, a lot of them took infections with them from the hospital to the nursing homes, where a lot of our elderly people died. So all of those things I would not have done, because this is not hindsight, not at all. And one final thing, because I mustn't hog the conversation, is this. We have the local skills, abilities, and armamentum locally. We bypassed all our local experts and set up new systems. Waste of time, waste of energy. We could have used our GPs, our public health doctors, our environmental health doctors, GUM physicians, NHS. We didn't use them. Similarly, the universities offered to do the testing, and they were also bypassed, and new lighthouse labs were set up.
Well, you mentioned, thank you. We'll come back to you, Bharat. You mentioned test and trace. It has cost in excess of £34 billion. Germany rolled out what was considered a world-class test and trace protocol early in the pandemic, but cases were out of control by Christmas 2020. So I think there's a case to answer there too. But Jay Bhattacharya, welcome to the programme. Do you think that lockdown skeptics have been proved right?
I think that the panoply of measures that we have adopted during the pandemic have proven to be an utter failure. I think if I had to pinpoint the central error was this illusion that we have some control over the spread of a highly infectious respiratory virus. You heard it just now from the last guest. That illusion was not true in February of 2020. By the time it had already arrived in the UK and the US, it was already too late for the lockdowns to actually have any effect. The analogy with SARS-1 from 2003 is instructive. In SARS-1 in 2003, we had a virus that didn't have an asymptomatic spread period, didn't have a pre-symptomatic spread period before you got sick. So if you had symptoms, that meant you were sick. If you didn't have symptoms, that means you weren't sick. That's not true for this virus. Test and trace doesn't work in that kind of context. Whenever there's an explosion of cases, the test and trace system gets overwhelmed and is completely useless. In fact, it's harmful because it leads to many people being quarantined that without any actual effect on the spread of the virus. The second, where I think lockdown executives have proved right, is the devastating effects of the lockdowns on the health of and psychological well-being of the population. Enormous damage to health in terms of skipped cancer treatments, heart attacks not treated, it just devastating losses, and as those are directly results of the lockdown, not a result of COVID itself. The third place where I think lockdown skeptics prove right is the use of panic to control societies is a utterly indefensible act by public health. And it has had enormous negative consequences on the trust that people place in public health. And I think it will continue into the future. When you panic a population, it's very hard to undo it. And as a result, when people finally do understand that they were panicked without actual effect, they start to distrust the people that cause that panic. And that's exactly what's happened with public health throughout this pandemic. I could go on a very long list of things that should have been done better, where lockdown skeptics pushed back, but I think that gives you the flavor.
Well, yes, I'll come back to you, Jay, in just a moment, and you as well, Bharat. Delighted to welcome to the studio the author of A State of Fear, which is all about the psychology and the psychological techniques used to roll out these COVID measures, Laura Dodsworth. Laura, what's your view on all this?
There's a lot that both of the previous guests just said that I agree with, but instead of going over the same old ground, pick up on Jay's last point. Yes, it's incredibly damaging to use manipulation and especially really egregious methods such as fear, shaming and social norms to encourage compliance with rules. And in fact, once you've used those tools, where do you go? The population was nudged into following the lockdown rules, and now we're being nudged back to normal. Manipulation got us into a certain stage, and that's what they're having to use to unwind. I can give you a couple of examples. Just today, I saw a video of Grant Shapps on a train talking about how the train won't give you silly announcements anymore, like putting your newspaper on the bin. I'd suggest the real point of that is that we're seeing a minister with a mask, without a mask on the train.
Yeah.
Another one, the death dashboard, as I call it, is going to be decommissioned because the data is considered now unreliable. The data's not changed, but the purpose it serves has changed. So there's lots of ways in which we're being nudged back to normal now. I don't think this is a responsible or mature way to handle a pandemic, and in fact we ripped up all of our pandemic plans at the beginning, something that was referred to earlier. Going back to Alison Pearson's article, which you referred to before, it was an absolute work of genius, and she talks about being pilloried. I mean, I can say from experience that when I talked about the need for schools to reopen, it felt like I was suffering social consequences. You know, you felt like a pariah for saying something as commonsensical and compassionate that children should be in school. So health is a state of psychophysical well-being. It shouldn't be about pursuing one virus to the detriment of all other considerations of health. And while you could say the jury's out on lockdown, I don't think it is, but I get how some people think that. Some of the rules were completely bonkers, which is what her articles highlighted. You know, we had debates about whether Scotch eggs were a substantial meal. If you were lucky enough to find a public loo open, you'd find alternate sinks were taped over so people didn't stand too close to each other. And, you know, there was this crazy story I read about how the bride and groom should sanitise their hands before and after exchanging rings, even though they'd be having sex that night. You know, there were absolutely crazy rules. But
Mrs. Dolan's watching.
But the real, you know, some of the real hardship was that the most intimate human rights and experiences were interfered with by the state.
Yeah.
Births, christening, marriages, deaths, funerals. You know, people died alone without anybody to hold their hand. Was that wrong? Yes, unequivocally.
Well, Jay, both yourself and Bharat are esteemed scientists. Is there an empirical method, Jay, by which we can evaluate these COVID measures and have a definitive answer? I mean, for example, is it reasonable to compare countries that had a different approach, or is that a red herring?
No, I think a careful comparison of how these measures have performed in various countries is actually vital going forward. I should say, even before we implemented them, there should have been a much better evidentiary base to justify them. Like closing schools, for instance. If we'd done better studies up until then, before we did it, that might have been a smarter thing. I know in the UK there was much less of that than in the United States. Much of the things that we adopted had no evidentiary base whatsoever to support them. Actually, can I just say one other thing that I realized I didn't mention that I think is quite important that you mentioned, Mark, earlier. During the early days of the pandemic, and actually almost all the way through the pandemic, scientists who disagreed with the lockdown consensus were marginalized and deplatformed. That was an enormous mistake. Because if you had at the table people who disagreed, respected people who disagreed and were treated respectfully, we would have had a very different and much better outcome than we had during the pandemic. Instead, what happened is that people who disagreed were smeared, were vilified. You've already heard some people, Laura already mentioned this. Throughout the pandemic, the Great Barrington Declaration was subject to a propaganda campaign by both governments in the UK and the US to smear and vilify the signatories of it, and to try to marginalize the ideas in order to create this illusion that there was a consensus when one did not actually exist. That, I think, was an enormous mistake. And I don't think anyone would disagree. That was proven as a very, very bad mistake. Even lockdown lovers would agree that was a bad mistake, I think.
Bharat, you've always been very balanced and very collegiate in all of these debates about COVID measures. And I know that what Jay is saying about hearing from all scientific voices is something you would back wholeheartedly. But can I ask you whether there's any firm evidence that lockdowns, masks and other COVID measures have actually worked?
Yeah, so let's deal with the easy one first. If this is a respiratory virus and it is aerosol spread, and if I contain my aerosol properly, and the key point is properly, meaning you wear your mask, a good quality mask worn properly, then you're capturing your aerosol. You're never going to capture your aerosol 100%. But even if you were to capture 70, 80% of that aerosol, you're reducing the transmissibility from one person to another. It cannot be 100%, but masks will help in those circumstances where my aerosol is going to infect you.
Bharat, Bharat, I hate interrupting you because I love rather listen than speak, but why are cases in countries with strict mask mandates, including an outdoor mask mandate in France, why are cases through the roof?
Well, as I just said to you, nothing is 100%. We are trying here to reduce it from... Is it? No. They do work. It is an aerosol spread. Once you have accepted that this is aerosol spread, then you have to do certain things like reduce that aerosol, ventilation, wear a mask, have any other measure that you can possibly have, HEPA filters, etc., to reduce the viral content in that volume of air that you are breathing in. That's clear stuff. The other stuff, I actually agree with the other two panelists here, which is some of our measures have been unbelievably unnecessary and draconian, including, I agree with you, when you talked about a pandemic of screens. What's all that about? Because if this thing is aerosol spread, apart from catching the direct hit, of course it is going to fly around and over and even be grounded by the screen. But we've got a pandemic of screens everywhere. Who brought those around? I have no idea. And similarly with what Ms. Dodson was saying about sanitize your hands before you exchange your nuptials and wedding rings, etc. All that is exceedingly silly, and we frightened people unnecessarily. I wouldn't go down that route of frightening people.
But finally, Bharat, I know there's so much to say, and we would love to speak for hours about this, especially with an elite guest list tonight. But I just wonder, I conjecture what would have happened if we'd done nothing. I don't know anyone, by the way, that says we should have let the virus rip. And I know that Jay's particular declaration, the idea of focus protection for the vulnerable, the Great Barrington Declaration. But what if we'd done nothing? Because I can't find a country in the world that has, in relative terms, a cricket score death toll. And in fact, if you look at global death tolls, among the highest in the world, Peru, for example, very strict mask mandates and lockdowns, and yet a high COVID death toll. But no country in the world with a cricket score death toll. I mean, let's look at Sweden, who didn't lock down, who kept their economy going, kept schools open, didn't have mask mandates. To date, 15,500 deaths from COVID, very sad, of course, all over 80, many with comorbidities, in a population of 10 million. Makes you think, doesn't it?
So the trick here is when you've got uncertainty, you keep out of being caught and getting infected and becoming ill and maybe dying. And the trick always has been, is buy yourself time. So now today, 2 years later, we have therapeutics, better techniques, we have vaccines, and now your survivability from a COVID infection is much better than when it first arrived. So that trick is there. It has always been there, which is try not to get infected, because we will find ways around improving your chances of survival were you to get infected.
Okay, well, look, closing thoughts, Jay Bhattacharya?
Well, I think a lot of the measures that we adopted had no evidence behind them. The mask, for instance, there was an enormous randomized literature that found that did not work to stop the flu. High quality at the beginning of the pandemic. We adopted an extraordinary set of measures, silenced voices that opposed it, and then suffered the consequences of that on a population worldwide scale, and nevertheless failed to stop the virus from spreading everywhere. All of this knowledge was available to us in many ways, even very early in the pandemic, that these policies would fail. And when we evaluate this so that we don't make the same mistakes in the next pandemic, we should make sure that those voices that were silenced before are heard loud and clear in the evaluation to come.
Laura Dodsworth, do you think if these measures were a mistake, the truth will ever out? If the lockdown skeptics were right, it's a big question. Bharat says no, but if they were, will they ever be vindicated?
I think the problem is actually now that we have an ideological split between people who believe and people who don't believe. And I'm using the word believe deliberately, because it's never going to be about evidence now. Masks have become the vestiture of the faithful. I'm afraid I disagree with Bharat completely. I know he's a doctor, so people will think I'm being an idiot. But we have plenty of time to conduct RCTs. And I think the reason we didn't conduct RCTs in schools, which we could have done, is because they know that masks don't work. There's plenty of evidence beforehand to show that. I think that while epidemics will come and go, our basic psychology is here to stay. And the enduring and the shameful story will be that people's fears were played to make them follow the rules. And that's going to come with consequences that still take years and decades to transpire. And that's going to be one of the great stories. I mean, we know that life expectancy is reduced in the UK from lockdown as well as COVID. We know that because the pension companies have given themselves huge bonuses, because life expectancy has gone down by 9/10 of a year already, and the Treasury's paid less into pensions. So I think the impact on health and all the collateral damages will be felt for years to come.
A very interesting and balanced conversation. My profound thanks to all three of you. The author of A State of Fear, Laura Dodsworth, who I'm delighted to say is going to stay with us for our panel for the next hour. Infectious disease expert, Dr. Bharat Pankhania. Thank you, Bharat. And one of the co-authors of the Great Barrington Declaration from Stanford Medical School in California, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. Thank you, Jay, as well. Fascinating stuff. What's your view? Mark at gbnews.uk. Next up in my news agenda with my brilliant panel, could Partygate split up the UK? And don't forget to get your questions in for my Mark Meets guest. It's the Olympic hero, Sharron Davies. She's live at 10, mark at gbnews.uk. And don't forget, another We Feel Your Pain. Tonight in the Spotlight, TV host Jeremy Vine. You won't want to miss it. See you shortly.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'll get to your emails in the next hour. So many emails coming through. Thank you very much for your comments so far. My monologue, all about whether there are some groups in our society who never want the pandemic to end, is now live on Twitter at GBNews. Sammy has crafted that one brilliantly. And with me reacting to the big stories of the day, my panel, entrepreneur and author Rebecca Jane, political commentator Benedict Spence, and, who you've just heard from, author of A State of Fear, broadcaster and journalist Laura Dodsworth. Now, according to a recent poll, support for Scottish independence is increasing to as much as 50% following the Partygate scandal. So my question to my panellists is a simple one. Rebecca Jane, could Partygate break up the union?
Absolutely, it could. And, you know, this is the problem with Boris Johnson, that we all have a bit of a joke about him. He seems a bit of a comedy character. He's having a serious detriment with the stupid things that he's doing. And this Partygate is an absolute joke. One of the things that you get taught in law school, one of the first things, is the ministerial code, the 7 principles of it. He's broken every single one of them. And of course that's going to have repercussions, because who on earth wants to sign up to carry on being part of the United Kingdom when we've got a moron at the head of it?
Yeah, I mean, what does breaking those rules tell us about Boris Johnson as a person?
He's a moron. He's a moron with no accountability, no responsibility.
You know, it's just not going to work if you sit on the fence. This programme's all about opinions. Well,
I can't understand why.
And I know, and it's interesting because you're dismissive about those measures that were enforced upon us, but obviously, I guess your argument would be, if you're going to have those measures, at least follow the rules yourself.
Well, one of the 7 points of the ministerial code is leadership, and he has none, because he doesn't stick to whatever he actually decides, and he's wishy-washy, and he goes backwards and he goes forwards, and he's hanging in there so he can keep on affording his £800 rolls of wallpaper.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about this, Benedict? Do you think the union is under serious threat?
No, not from this. I can understand why Boris Johnson is not popular in Scotland. He has never been popular in Scotland, and Tories writ large are not actually particularly popular in Scotland. So, you know, when you've got that combination of a Westminster...
They're like red squirrels, really.
Well, yeah, they are. And to be honest, you know, every time Westminster does something, Holyrood uses it as an opportunity to take a swipe at them, and it's a very popular thing. But actually, we've seen this before in Scotland. Something bad happens in Westminster. Popularity with Westminster in Scotland, such as it is, nosedives, and then slowly it creeps back up. But the key thing, actually, why it's not going to cause the breakup of the union is, at such a time as we ever have another referendum on Scottish independence, Boris Johnson will not be Prime Minister. He will be long gone by that point. And the point is, actually, there won't be a call, I think, for another referendum on Scottish independence with the union in such a precarious position. People have learnt, you know, elites have learnt from losing the vote on Brexit that you don't do that. You don't take that risk. It's a very silly thing to do. And as much as the SNP clamour for it, there's actually no need for it, as far as I can see right now. So, no, I think it's a story that can be, you know, you can explain why it's very unpopular, but it's not an immediate threat to the union.
Laura, just a few seconds on this, but I mean, I'm going to be a spin doctor here and say that I think the pandemic, for its sins, has been an advert for the union, because we've had a vaccine rollout which was very coordinated, And as a country, we've been able to borrow colossal amounts of money because of our excellent credit rating. We're obviously stronger together.
I can't believe you've literally just put all my words into my mouth. But I was.
Yeah, but you just said it so much better.
No, you just said it better. You don't know how I was going to say it. No, what I would have said was actually a pandemic has shown how completely bonkers devolution can be. How silly to have different rules on each side of a border on one landmass. It's made no sense whatsoever. And look at the situation you've got in Wales now, where if people want to go to the pub without flashing a QR code, they just cross the border and go to England.
I know.
So it's madness. In a way,
ridiculous.
In a way, I'd be kind of behind it if everybody who wants all the rules to stay could go and be north of the border, and everybody who wants to get on with life can be south of the border.
Well, I've got
and do you know where the nicest place to live would be, and where everybody would want to end up living?
It was so
south of the
fantastic watching so many Scots and Welsh folk having a brilliant party on New Year's Eve in England. That's what the union's about. Love to have some folk from Northern Ireland here too. The more the merrier. Coming up, there's still time for you to make your voice heard in Mark Meets. Olympic swimmer Sharron Davies is live in a couple of minutes. Get your questions in, mark@gbnews.uk. So much to come. I'll see you after this.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Adele cancels a show in America. That's not gone down well at all. And has Joe Biden lost the plot? Another shocking video in which he really becomes quite incoherent. We'll get reaction from the Queen of US showbiz, political and royal reporting, Kinsey Schofield. She's coming in very specially for us on a Friday evening. Also, my Mark Meets guest is Sharron Davies, Olympic swimmer, TV presenter, strong views as well on trans women participating in female sport. It'll be an amazing interview. She's got quite the story to tell. And in a couple of minutes' time, I'll be doing another We Feel Your Pain. It's a regular item in which we reach out to a celebrity that's going through a tough time. Andrew Neil and Mark Kermode, the film critic, LBC's Ian Dale, have been subject to the We Feel Your Pain treatment. Next up, it's TV presenter Jeremy Vine. You won't want to miss it. But first, the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Thanks, Mark. The top story tonight, Russia will be punished with a package of sweeping measures if troops enter Ukraine, according to Downing Street. It follows frank talks today between the US and Russia in Geneva, designed to ease tensions between the two sides. Russia's Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov insisted his country had never threatened the Ukrainian people and had no plans to invade. But the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, says Moscow needs to choose now between diplomacy or conflict.
So that's the choice that Russia faces now. It can choose the path of diplomacy that can lead to peace and security, or the path that will lead only to conflict, severe consequences, and international condemnation.
Antony Blinken. Well, earlier the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss called on Russia to desist and step back from Ukraine. She was in Australia when she said an invasion would lead to a terrible loss of life.
That's why we urge President Putin to desist and step back from Ukraine before he makes a massive strategic mistake.
Liz Truss. Well, in other news today, the Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng has told GBNews that claims of Conservative whips blackmailing MPs over the distribution of public funds are ridiculous. His comments follow reports that rebels are threatening to publish secret text messages and recordings from the Prime Minister's supporters.
Any idea that the Whip's office have this in their gift, I think should be challenged immediately. And clearly, if these allegations are true, that's a very, very serious allegation, and I'd want to see them properly investigated.
Kwasi Kwarteng. A 26-year-old man who is obsessed with the devil is facing life in prison for killing one woman and attacking two more in the space of 4 hours. Brian Sengendo killed a 44-year-old woman in North London last August. Earlier the same night, he targeted two other women. He's been found guilty on 7 charges, including murder, attempted murder, kidnap and rape. The judge praised police for catching a potential serial killer. He'll be sentenced in March. And a suspected drug trafficker has been arrested in Spain just days after he was named as one of the UK's most wanted. 30-year-old Joshua Hendry was caught in Marbella in southern Spain after an off-duty police officer recognised him from publicity. He's alleged to have trafficked heroin and cocaine from Liverpool to Grimsby. Entertainment news, lastly, stars including Cher, Brian May and Bonnie Tyler have all paid tribute tonight to the US rock legend Meat Loaf, who's died at the age of 74. The singer, who sold more than 100 albums, passed away with his wife at his side. His career, which spanned 6 decades, saw him become a global superstar with hits like that, such as I'd Do Anything for Love, and of course, this one, Bat Out of Hell. He also starred in 65 movies, including The Rocky Horror Picture Show and even Wayne's World. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Mark and Tonight.
On COVID measures, your emails are coming in thick and fast. I wish I'd had more time in the first hour. Please forgive me. Let's get your views aired in the next 60 minutes. This one from Hugh, who says, "Hi, Mark. I'm 73 years of age and have taken the 3 jabs, making me eligible for a COVID passport. But I'm disgusted by the treatment of the unvaccinated. I refuse to go to a restaurant or other venue where this piece of useless nonsense is required. Why don't the COVID passport zealots just come out and put a star on the clothing of the unclean? Love your show." Well, Hugh from Belfast, thank you so much. Many viewers in Northern Ireland, and it's wonderful to have you on board. Do tell your friends and spread the word. Let's change the world together. It's time now for an occasional item that we do on the show called We Feel Your Pain, in which we reach out to a celebrity or a public figure that's going through a tough time. Tonight, it's the very talented and versatile broadcaster, Jeremy Vine. The Radio 2 and Channel 5 star sent out this tweet in support of an article by the Telegraph journalist Alison Pearson. "Great examples," says Jeremy from Alison Pearson, "of some of the absolutely mad things that were done around the country, although not in Downing Street, to comply with so-called COVID rules, including chaining up children's swings in a park." Now, many were confused by this tweet because they consider Jeremy Vine to be among many figures in the media who have been strangely quiet for 2 years about the downside of lockdowns, face masks and other COVID measures. One of the people that was very surprised to see this intervention from Jezza was our very own Liam Halligan, The GBNews presenter, author and economics columnist at The Telegraph, of course. He's also the host of the entertaining and lockdown-critical podcast Planet Normal, which he presents with the aforementioned Alison Pearson. Liam tweeted the following. "Where have you been for the last 2 years, Jeremy? Why didn't you critique or even report what you now call the absolutely mad and often deeply harmful restrictions at the time?" Well, Jeremy Vine must have been deeply troubled by this tweet because he snapped back with this. There you go. He says, "Why do you put out a tweet like this, which you must know is totally untrue," says Jezza. "Here are 4 examples of my radio show from the last 2 years, exactly the same territory as Alison. You didn't listen, and now you attack me." It's surprising, really. You'd expect that somebody with so many media gigs would be quite thick-skinned and keen on debate. People don't seem to be convinced by Jezza's defence. Here are a few responses to his tweet from the great British public. Let's start with this one. Bob says, 4 examples in 2 years, great work. Touch of irony there, I suspect. Next up, I've got another tweet, and this one's quite interesting from Claire. "You can hardly put yourself in the same league as Alison and Liam," says Claire. "I've seen you attack people all the time for being a sceptic, and now you're trying to put yourself on the right side of history. I've heard you like cycling, but you'll have to do a lot more backpedalling." Nice line, well done, Claire. How about Crispin? "Too little, too late, Jeremy. You could have helped stop this long ago." And there's more. Chandler, "That's not criticism of the restrictions, Jeremy. You can try and walk back on your scaremongering, but we know and remember the reality." And last but not least, Zippy. "At the time of writing Liam Halligan, 2,638 likes. Jeremy Vine, retort, 13 likes. So many in the media furiously backpedaling now. It's too late. You all set out your positions trying to instill fear into everyone, crying out for more, more, more. We see you." Well, many see Jeremy because he's on telly all the time and, of course, on the radio. Now, as the day went on, this gentle intervention from Liam Halligan, hardly an attack, seems to have really bothered Jezza, because this national broadcaster, who surely exists to spark and engage in multiple conversations as part of his job, actually blocked Liam on Twitter. That's right, he blocked him. Here is the incriminating evidence. There you go, what a shocking tweet. There's the bloody dagger. You are blocked. Interesting stuff. Now, I can't believe it. Jeremy Vine, famous communicator, who doesn't want to communicate. He's just excommunicated Liam Halligan. But we need to cut Jezza some slack. Perhaps he has been excoriatingly critical of COVID measures, questioning their efficacy and focusing on their damage, but he's just kept it to himself. Perhaps he has privately been against school closures, masks in the classroom. Perhaps he's been against half a trillion quid's worth of national debt. Perhaps he's been against a mental health crisis. Perhaps he's been against damaged lives and livelihoods, an NHS waiting list of 6 million people, and a spiralling non-COVID death toll. Perhaps privately, he's been talking about an Office for National Statistics Freedom of Information request emerging this week, which confirms 17,500 people over 2 years have passed away directly from or with COVID in the absence of other comorbidities, comparable with a tough flu season. Perhaps Jezza has been a lockdown sceptic all along. That's probably what it is. He's been a lockdown sceptic all along. So Jezza doesn't just disagree with Liam, he's blocked him, this famous communicator who tops up his meagre 6-figure salary from the BBC with a Channel 5 show, wants no further contact. Now, I know Liam Halligan, both as a colleague and a friend, and I know he's hurting. There's a lot of bad things that can befall you in this industry. Tough ratings, a car crash interview, getting your facts wrong, your show getting cancelled, harsh critical reviews in the press. But could there be anything worse than getting blocked by Jeremy Vine? Blocked by Vine. Could there be anything worse? Yes, Liam's an extraordinarily experienced and respected journalist and a broadcaster of considerable note, with a string of books and newspaper columns to his name. and a hit show here on GBNews called On the Money. That's all well and good. But how do you bounce back from blocked by Vine? You don't. There's nowhere back from hashtag blocked by Vine. I've been watching Liam's show On the Money since this happened. Fantastic as ever. A growing audience that love the show, but he's not right. You can see it in his eyes because he's been blocked by Vine. How do you come back from that? You don't. It's funny, isn't it? It's almost like Jezza and his pals are seeing the COVID narrative fall like a house of cards, perhaps thinking, crumbs, will this be like the Iraq War times 100? A colossal mistake, the price of which we will be paying for years, if not decades to come. Will Beth Rigby from Sky News have the same thought? Laura Koonsberg at the Beeb. Big Robert Peston. Is he another secret lockdown skeptic? When they were at those press conferences asking why we're not locking down harder, faster, tougher, and when Sky News this week posed the question, are we lifting COVID measures too soon, even though Omicron is clearly milder than a night out with Aled Jones, perhaps they actually were against the COVID measures all along. And anyone who says otherwise may wind up being blocked. Blocked by Rigby, blocked by Koonsberg, blocked by Peston. But there's only one thing worse than being blocked by Rigby, Koonsberg and Peston, and that's being blocked by Vine. How do you come back from that? You don't. You don't come back from being blocked by Vine. Liam, you're a great guy, but what the hell were you thinking? Jeremy Vine, we feel your pain. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of entertainment, business, professional sport, and those simply who have a big story to tell. Tonight, a woman who is a bigger threat in the water than a shark or a school of piranhas. Olympic swimmer Sharron Davies, NBE. Sharron represented Great Britain in the Olympics and European Championships and competed for England in the Commonwealth Games. She won a silver medal in the 400-metre individual medley at the 1980 Olympics in Moscow and 2 gold medals at the 1978 Commonwealth Games in Edmonton. Since retiring from the sport, she has worked as a TV presenter and served as a patron of charities for disabled children, and she is a fitness fanatic and a fitness teacher. She was a contestant on Dancing on Ice in 2010, that's right. She starred in Gladiators with the impressive nickname Amazon, as well as co-presenting Superstars for Channel 5 and The Big Breakfast on Channel 4. As well as her media work, as I mentioned, she is a fitness expert, having set up the highly successful Sharron Davies Training, whose members can get fit from the luxury of their own home or the office. And I'm delighted to say that Sharron Davies, MBE, joins me now. Hi, Sharron.
Good evening, Mark. Oh, I'm better go and sit down after all that. It was the fact that you actually mentioned all the years, which was really depressing.
No, listen, I can't believe what you've packed into the decades, and you are still the picture of health, ever youthful. Can you remember the first time you were in a pool?
Oh, yeah. You know, on the BBC when they have that Lido right at the front of Plymouth Hoe, you know, the big circular one, they play the drum. Yeah. That's where I learnt to swim, in that pool, because that's where I come from. I come from Plymouth, and my dad was Navy, so I was always near the water, always in the water. And by the time I was about 8 or 9, everything else that I did kind of dropped away, and I was training every day. So, yeah, it was, you know, water's definitely in my blood, I think.
And did you have certain physical attributes? I mean, were you a gifted athlete that suited you to swimming, or was it more your mentality?
It's definitely both. You know, if you're going to be competing with the best in the world, you've got to physiologically be the right shape and size. You're never going to get a 6'2" gymnast or, you know, a 5'3" basketball player. So swimmers are quite a tall breed. We tend to have long arms. We tend to have big feet and big hands. It sounds really attractive, but that's our paddles. And so, you know, everyone that will be in an Olympic final will be of that kind of shape. And if you look at someone like Rebecca's about 5'11". I used to be 5'11". I don't think there's a female under 6 foot that's in the final of the 100 meters freestyle. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
And what about that mentality, particularly when you were competing at the elite level? I mean, how did you manage the nerves?
It builds up, so you do get used to it. Obviously you start competing at club level, and then it goes to city level and county level, and West County level, and then national, and the whole thing just kind of grows and grows, and you just learn to cope with it. But obviously you do get nervous, absolutely. I mean, if someone had given me the out just before the Olympic final back in 1980, I would have probably locked myself in the bathroom and stayed there. Once the gun goes and you're racing, then all those nerves actually go, and you just go into automatic mode. But it is a very nervous thing. And part, I guess, of being a champion is being able to cope with that nervous energy and that expectation. And that's why someone like Adam is so amazing, because not only is he an Olympic champion, he's come back and won it for the second time when there is so much expectation and pressure on him. It's much easier to become an Olympic champion than it is to retain that Olympic championship.
What's the hardest thing about competing in swimming?
Just being wet, really. I mean, I was a very, very clean child, I have to say. I was always thinking of chlorine, which going through buckets of cocoa butter and hair moisturizer all the time. But, it was on the genuine side, it was quite antisocial. So I was doing 6 hours a day, 2 hours in the pool in the morning, 2 hours again in the evening, and then 2 hours of land work. So as a teenager, it doesn't leave you a lot of free time. And silly stuff like watching last night's TV programs when you go to school become very important at the time. Obviously now they're very unimportant, but you don't feel like you're fitting in. Luckily for me, I suppose I was always looking towards the bigger picture, and my parents are very good at being able to do that for me. And I wanted to win. There's no doubt about it. That's got to be something that's there. You can't put that absolute desire to be the best, to give things up, to train really hard, to learn from every time that something doesn't work out, that you go back and you train a bit harder. So, that's got to be a bit of an instinct, I think.
And what about representing your country at the Olympics? Tell me about the emotions involved.
Just hugely proud. I mean, on my biography on my Twitter, it's the first thing I say, very proud Brit. And I am. I'm a very, very proud Brit. I love standing underneath the Union Jack. I'm very proud of my country and the people that are in it. And so I was always very proud of being part of the British team at the Olympic Games. And I did my first games at 13. And then I won my medal 4 years later. And then I had a sort of enforced 8 years away because we had no trust funds in swimming at that time, even though they had them in track and field. And then I came back and competed in the 92 Olympic Games when I was nearly 30. So, yeah, for me, Tokyo was my 12th Olympic Games. And I've always felt very privileged to be involved. My life sort of goes in 4-year cycles.
It's remarkable. Where are the medals?
Where are the medals? Actually, they're tucked away somewhere or other. Yeah, I mean, I do take them out and about. When I visit schools and things, I let the kids pick them up and look at them, because I think that it's really important that they can see that we all came from the same place that they did. I started off as a little girl down in Plymouth who rode ponies and went swimming, and, wasn't anything particularly special, just a very normal little girl who just had opportunity and worked very hard. And so that's very important message. So the medals go out and about.
And you mentioned children. How important is the provision of swimming pools for children and young people? And how do we compare, Sharron, to elsewhere in Europe or the States?
That's an amazing question, actually, Mark, because we've lost so far 250 pools in England alone since the beginning of COVID. So a lot of local authorities used it as an excuse to run down facilities and then not reopen them. Now, swimming, being able to swim, is probably the only sport that actually can save a life, unless maybe you're running away from a tiger. But, ultimately, we have lots of seas and rivers and quarries, and our kids need to be able to swim. Not only is it a lifesaver, it's a skill that you can have for life, that you can do right up until, from cradle to grave. So terribly important that our kids can be able to swim, and a very social family activity as well. So that's very worrying. And in fact, Swim England are predicting at the moment that by the end of this decade, we'll have lost 2,000 swimming pools in the UK.
And the thing is, we weren't doing, Sharron, we weren't doing brilliantly before the pandemic, were we, compared to countries like France, Germany and the US?
No, absolutely. We're one of the only countries in sort of what we call the Western world that doesn't have mandates that says we have to have leisure facilities, including swimming pools, to look after our communities and to keep them fit. And the one thing that COVID has shown us, that it's terribly important that we are as fit as we possibly can be, so that we can take responsibility for our own health, and it gives us a better chance of being able to fight off things like COVID. So I work with a company called Paragon, and we're now looking at bringing in tent-style sort of buildings from North America, which are already very, very popular in North America, as you mentioned. And we can build leisure facilities in the UK for about a tenth of the price of the old-fashioned kind of structures that are basically coming to the end of their life now. So that's something I'm quite excited about as well. Because if you ask me if there was one thing that I'm really passionate about, obviously apart from loving my swimming and my swimmers, it would be about trying to get people healthier and fitter and kids swimming.
Well, that's right. You've got your website, Sharron Davies Fitness.
Yeah, so you can find Sharron Davies Fitness on SharronDavies.com. I've been putting that together for about a year. Obviously, now we've been working from home. Sadly, if you look at health clubs, we're still not back to the numbers that we were before pre-COVID. So people have decided that they do want to work out more at home. So I thought, well, how can I design a program that can be the minimum amount of time that people can spend exercising? Because the first excuse is that we haven't got time, which isn't always true, but it's the reason people give. Another one is cost. So it's the price of a cup of coffee a week. And the other one is, will I get results? And it's absolutely, you will get results. You know, it takes about 3 months to make or break a habit. So you do have to stick at something. But this is a program where you can work out with me 4 times a week and make a real difference.
And the website is SharronDavies.com, or just Google Sharron Davies with 2 R's. Sharron, before you go, the clock's against us. But look, I know that you're super pro-trans, you know, you're a very, very tolerant and embracing person of all lifestyles. But you have spoken out about trans women participating in female sport. And what is your view on that one?
So it's not just trans women that are sort of the issue. It's also trans men, to be honest with you, which are obviously females that are transitioning and taking testosterone. So if they were to compete in the female category, the women's category, they wouldn't be able to. They'd be disqualified. So it's about finding solutions so that everybody can do sport. You know, you're absolutely right. It has to be inclusive. However, it does also have to be fair. So the reason we have categories in sport, whether that's male and female races, whether that's the under 10s versus the under 15s, whether that's the heavyweights versus the flyweights, is to create fair competition. Now, the difference between male and female performance is between 10 and 30%, which is absolutely huge. And I suppose one of the reasons I'm outspoken is because I went through the East German era, where so many of us lost out on our medals to the sort of East German doping program that was going on in the 70s and the 80s. And they were able to produce, through the use of testosterone through puberty, about a 9% advantage. Now, in the 1980 Olympics, where I won my silver medal, they won 97 of the 102 medals that were available in the swimming pool in the women's events. And yet nobody went, oh, that's a bit weird. And they won 1 in the men's. So many women lost out on those potential medals. I mean, I was lucky. I beat 2. I had a silver medal. It's given me an opportunity to have a career. There are British girls that came 4th behind 3 East Germans that no one's ever heard of, who would have been Olympic champion, and their whole lives would have been different. So I just don't want to see another generation of young girls miss out on what should be theirs. It's not a matter of wanting to ban anybody. It's about people competing in the right category. And we need to maybe create an open category so that trans men and trans women are welcome to compete in that category, and then a protected female category so that half of this world get the right to equal opportunities in sport.
What a great solution. Sharron, it's been fantastic to have you on the programme. We haven't had a chance to talk about your amazing TV career. Loved you on Gladiators and The Big Breakfast. Perhaps you'll come and join us on the sofa for our panel when you're in the capital.
I love to. Now that life is coming back to normal, and there's so many people on that panel I admire, so fantastic. And well done to you at GBNews, because I know you're going from strength to strength.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very high praise coming from you, Sharron. Look forward to catching up really soon. Sharron Davies, MBE, no less. Lots more to come. The government are going to get rid of annoying train announcements. What kind of public announcements annoy you? So much to get through. Another great British game show as well. And has Joe Biden finally lost the plot? We'll speak to the Queen of US Royal Political and Showbiz Reporting, Kinsey Schofield, after this.
Good evening. It's not as cold out there this evening as yesterday because there's more cloud around. That cloud is going to make for quite a grey weekend for most of us, but a few spots will continue to see a bit of sunshine, and most of us are not going to see any rain thanks to this area of high pressure that's been ambling across the country for the past couple of days and will stick around for much of next week. There are weather fronts approaching the far northwest and across the Highlands, the Western Isles. There will at times be some drizzly rain, certainly through this evening and overnight, but for most it is a dry night, but with a lot of cloud. Still some breaks in the cloud across eastern England, parts of the south, and where those breaks persist, a touch of frost is still going to happen. But for most towns and cities, warmer than last night, that cloud acting like a blanket and keeping temperatures above freezing. That cloud, though, is obviously going to blot out the sun for most of us during Saturday. Parts of eastern England, northeast Scotland, and across parts of the south will see some breaks in the cloud and a bit of sunshine. That cloud, though, quite thick across the Highlands, Argyll and Bute, with some rain at times here. Otherwise, though, most of us will be dry. Temperatures a little higher than today's values, 7, 8. Top temperatures probably northern Scotland, where we could reach 11 or 12 with a bit of brightness, say Caithness and Sutherland or the Moray Firth. Still some patchy rain across the Highlands, the Western Isles during Saturday evening, but elsewhere, if you're heading out tomorrow evening, it should be dry, but again, it will be fairly cloudy. Again, a few pockets of frost possible on Sunday morning, and again, during the day, we'll see a few breaks in the cloud, maybe parts of East Wales, northeast England, northeast Scotland, so some blue sky here. Otherwise, most of us just rather glum but dry. The main exception to that dry weather again, the far northwest, where there'll be some rain and drizzle over the Highlands. Quite breezy all weekend across the northwest, those winds strengthening further on Sunday. Temperatures again 8, 9, 10 Celsius. At times weather fronts will push into the far north, but for most high pressure hangs on even into next week, keeping things largely dry.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
So many emails coming in across a range of topics from tonight's show. Let's have a look at this one. This is regarding COVID measures. Dear Mark, your panel discussion programmes are such a breath of fresh air. Pure, free, unadulterated truths spoken, which citizens and health professionals dare not speak for fear of being ostracised and marginalised. My deepest hope is that once this folly is revealed, we learn some precious lessons about arrogance of science, farmers and politicians, and that's signed by A Medic Anonymous. Such a great discussion between yourself, Laura Dodsworth, Jay Bhattacharya and Bharat Pankhania on lockdown. You absolutely trounce any BBC discussions nowadays. A proper, interesting, not soundbite-filled debate with respectful disagreement and contributions and insightful comments. Really, really good stuff. Not really bothered about fixed opinions after that kind of discussion. Just feel informed and enlightened and given things to consider. Well, thank you, Alan, for your kind words, and thanks for watching the show. And last but not least, on Sharron Davies, Declan says, Dear Mark, I bet Sharron Davies looks great in a swimsuit. Well, Declan, she does, but not as good as me. Now, let's crack on. Lots to get through. Don't forget, after 11, it's another edition of Headliners. I'll be in the host's chair, as I am every Friday, Saturday and Sunday, with two top comedians looking at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. But it's time now for Uncensored USA. We normally do it on a Saturday, but we've got an emergency Friday meeting. We're going to have a look at the big stories in the world of politics and beyond with the Queen of US showbiz, political and royal reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Hi, Kinsey.
Have you been blocked by Jeremy Vine yet? The clock is ticking.
It's coming. I can feel it. I'm going the same way as Halligan. And you'll be next, Kinsey.
I hope so. I want to join the club.
Hashtag blocked by Vine. Now, Kinsey, great to have you on the show on a Friday. I'm really, really worried about Joe Biden. I don't think this is political anymore. This is not about left and right. It's just about whether the leader of the free world is in a correct mental state to be running the country. Take a look at this clip.
Oh, I think it could be, but I hope in God that look, maybe I'm kidding myself. Much more informed on the, I've never seen a time when the political coverage,
Oh dear, Kinsey. I mean, this is not ageism, is it? Because you can be very, very old and amazingly good at your job. But I just question the fitness of this man for high office.
I mean, you're not the only one. Even some of our more liberal outlets like CNN and MSNBC, they were very concerned after this. It was 2 hours of that. You've cut that up beautifully, but it was actually 2 hours of that. CNN, one of the commentators said that he was foggy and meandering. I mean, I think that's a really great way to describe exactly what we just watched on Twitter. Some of the commentators now calling him a liability. I don't, and people were criticizing James Rosen for saying, are you mentally fit for this position, which he stood up and asked him. So I think it's a legitimate question after watching the man for 2 hours, struggle to string sentences together. I don't know. The original clip that we watched online was 2 minutes and he did not finish one thought. He just kept interrupting himself and going in different directions.
Well, yes. I mean, here's some footage of him getting lost on his way into his own house, which I will be honest with you, I have done on occasion, Kinsey, but normally about 3 a.m. late.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, how much alcohol had you consumed at the time?
Yeah, it's difficult. You see his security operative there looking in confusion as to where he's actually off to. Heading for the bushes. But look, we wish him well, of course. Go on, Kinsey. What do you think?
I was going to say one of the things that really I struggled with while watching that conference was Biden questioning the legitimacy of the 2022 midterm elections. This is a premature comment saying that he's questioning the legitimacy of the 2022 midterm elections. This is after a year of making conservatives feel like conspiracy theorists. This is after a year of just shutting us down, saying that there's no way that Donald Trump, I don't know what to believe. I know I didn't vote for the guy, but the way that they have just made Republicans feel so small, ignorant, stupid, and silly over the thought that perhaps something nefarious might have happened during the 2020 election. And then he says this during the press conference as if to set us up for that argument during the 2022 midterm elections. Are they trying to set us up for that shakedown?
Yeah, that's right. Straight out of the Trump playbook, of course, Kinsey. Quite hypocritical. Now, someone else that's in a bit of hot water is Adele. She's had to cancel a major show. Let's take a look at this video.
Hi, listen, I'm so sorry, but my show ain't ready. We've tried absolutely everything that we can to put it together in time and for it to be good enough for you, but we've been absolutely destroyed by delivery delays and COVID. Half my crew, half my team are down with COVID, they still are. And it's been impossible to finish the show. And I can't give you what I have right now. And I'm gutted. And I'm sorry it's so last minute. We've been awake for over 30 hours now trying to figure it out, and we've run out of time. And
now, Kinsey, Adele is not responsible for COVID rules, of course, but are you persuaded by that apology? Was it sincere?
I do think it was sincere. I've never seen her break down like that. So I do sympathize with her. On the other hand, 24 hours is not a lot of notice for people that have traveled from all over the world to see her concert. So I sympathize with them as well. But she was broken in that video, and she states in that video that she'd been up for 30 hours. And I think that that really does kind of define what you're seeing. Her emotional state, that is a stressed individual. She is overwhelmed and she's hit a wall. So I sympathize with her. Could they have done something on a smaller level? Just had her with somebody playing the piano. Could they have done something that was streamed online for everybody so that people could feel like they were getting something instead of them just taking away and postponing? Yes, they could have offered something in return instead of just saying, sorry, it's not going to happen. But I sincerely sympathize with her in this instance because she does appear to be heartbroken.
Kinsey, look forward to catching up with you next weekend. Kinsey Schofield is the queen of US political, showbiz and royal reporting. Her website is todiefordaily.com. Do check it out. Lots more to come in the show, including another edition of the Great British Game Show, and tonight in celebration of the great life and legacy of Meat Loaf, who sadly passed away. Also in our news agenda with my panel, we're going to talk about how to deliver the perfect apology, and the government are going to get rid of annoying announcements on the trains. We'll discuss that and much more. I'll see you in 2.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Jennifer says, hi Mark, great show tonight. Would love to hear more on Northern Ireland. Well, Jennifer, we'll definitely work on that. I'll feed that back to my team because I want to hear about everybody in our amazing country, in Northern Ireland, in Wales, in Scotland and in England too. It is, after all, GB News. Now, reacting to the big stories of the day, entrepreneur and author Rebecca Jane, political commentator Benedict Spence, very well dressed as always, handsome devil, James Bond figure that he cuts, and author of A State of Fear, Laura Dodsworth. Brilliant stuff. Well, guys, let's start with this one. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, has called time on the endless torrent of announcements on trains. In a tweet, He said that by doing so, the passenger experience would be better. And here's a video he posted to help us understand the message.
If you are using a mobile phone or personal stereo, please consider other passengers by keeping volume levels low. Your attention, please. Due to today's inclement weather, please take extra care whilst on the station. Service update from the control room. There is currently a good service running on the line.
If you travel by train, you've probably heard some of these messages, time and again, repeated over and over. Well, some messages are clearly important, but others just state the obvious. So we've reviewed the messages that are played on the tannoy system, and where they add nothing but noise and irritation, we're removing them.
Well, there you go. I think I'll be out of a job soon. Very impressive performance from Grant Shapps. Was that a subtle bid for the leadership of the Tory party? Who knows? Well, Laura, you mentioned this because you think this is a nudge from the government.
I do think it's possible. So I really like this principle of not having unnecessary announcements on the train. I'm here for this. But you see, there's something interesting about this. When this was filmed, somebody would have made a decision whether he was going to wear a mask or not. He's on a train, which has been a very contentious place for masks. You know, we've got Sadiq Khan saying he wants people to continue to wear masks on transport in London. Grant Shapps is not wearing a mask. What does this mean? I think this video actually is in part about the nudge back to normal. I think it's got an underlying message, which is we're getting back to normal.
So it's
Otherwise,
not
he'd be
actually,
wearing a mask.
it's not really about the announcements. This is a smokescreen, a Trojan horse.
I think it's possible. Some people might say I'm reading too much into it. I'm just going to float this as an idea. I think it's about nudging the country back to normal. It's about de-escalating fear and getting us used to seeing faces on transport again.
Well, you show a deep knowledge and understanding of psychological techniques that were used to help roll out those COVID policies in the course of the pandemic. A State of Fear is rightly a bestseller, even though I don't think you could get a media interview on Sky and the Beeb, but we've welcomed you with open arms here at GB News and perhaps one or two other places. But you also, I remember when Boris Johnson was spotted without a mask at a hospital. And it happened more than once. And the Mirror had a headline that 3 times they had to ask him to put a mask on. And I thought, Boris Johnson's not a stupid person. There are cameras that follow him everywhere. And I wondered whether that was an early nudge. Do you remember that story?
I
remember
do.
when he got in trouble for not wearing a mask?
That's happened so many times. I'm really not sure what to make of that. But this is very considered. This is very deliberate. This is a promotional video. This isn't just him walking through a hospital and he's been snapped. Although obviously you're right. He's got photographers on him the whole time. This is considered, this is deliberate. So yes, I think there's an underlying message that's not about training.
And for those of us that do want to get back to normal, I guess it's good news if that is the case.
I think it's welcome. You see, the thing is, though, for some people, letting go of masks is going to be frightening because the relaxation of restrictions for some people is quite nerve-wracking. Richard Bergen said in the House of Commons last week that once the restrictions are dropped, once the mask mandates go, people will fall ill and die. You know, he said that. It's a little extremist, it's a bit hyperbolic, but it probably reflects the fears that some people have. And so actually, we've got to be quite gentle with people's feelings in this time, I think, because some people have been in a state of fear.
Will there always be division over masks, do you think?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I've set out the case quite explicitly in the book that they were deliberately supposed to be signals for fear and to give people the sense that there was danger and to take care. But they've transmogrified into a completely different symbol, a symbol of morality. They signal your virtue, you're a good person.
And your politics, potentially.
And your politics. You know, we've got this really hyper-partisan response to something which is it's a cloth rag, but it's also been a public health measure, and I think it's become a symbol of virtue.
Yeah, I mean, Benedict, I want to get on to announcements, but just on this point, that the subtle message of that video is Grant Shapps not wearing a mask. Let's go back to normal. What's your interpretation?
Well, I think, as Laura says, even if it's not a deliberate nudge, at some point during filming, somebody will have said, because it's on a train, which is one of the most contentious places, oh, are we wearing a mask, are we not? And either it'll have been, no, there's a policy, or it'll have been, what's the matter with wearing, taking one off? Simply because, it's not just Grant Shapps that's not wearing a mask in the video, other passengers, actors, but the other people in the carriage aren't wearing them either. So at some point, as I say, even if it wasn't deliberately choreographed, somebody would have gone, oh, should we be wearing masks? Should we? And they'll have gone, no. So, I think whatever one you want to take, either it's a deliberate nudge or it's a sort of a slightly coincidental one, I think that this is certainly it's certainly moving in that direction. As I said earlier in your show, I'm not particularly optimistic that we are out of the woods and that we are definitely going in that direction. I think that this could be rolled back very easily, and I think a large enough swathe of the public are either still scared or have got this slightly sort of fetishistic attachment to these masks. So we could actually go back in that direction, but this is the direction of travel we're currently going in, and let's just hope that it continues.
Will we ever be free from the masks, Rebecca Jane?
Oh, for goodness sakes, I hope so. I think it's bizarre. I don't understand. I don't think that sort of announcement spam has ever been a thing. So what is this actually about? I think that Laura's view is quite optimistic, actually, and I don't think that the government particularly want to be sending out a message that, let's drop the masks yet. I don't think that that's a thing for them. I think that they still want to push that narrative. So I don't understand what this is actually all about, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think there's something behind this, and I find it strange.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a key policy, is it?
No.
We've got a cost of living crisis. We've got, increasing tensions with Russia over Ukraine. There are lots of issues, the biggest recession in 300 years, and we're worried about announcements on trains.
Well, this is the thing. On the subject of, wanting to sort of move away from the state of fear, I can guarantee you the one needless announcement that they won't get rid of is the one where it says, if you see something suspicious, tell somebody, tell the police, inform on people. They won't be getting rid of that one.
You didn't say that right. Say it sorted.
Well, I wasn't going to try and act it out like I've heard hundreds and hundreds
Well,
of
what
times
I don't like
before.
about those announcements, Benedict, is that I'm normally just nodding off. I've sat down on the train, I've read a bit of a book and I've fallen asleep. And then I get an announcement that the buffet car's open. And it's like, I could have found out for myself. Would you go for zero announcements on a train? I think airplanes
I'd like to know what station I'm at.
Airplanes are even worse, aren't they?
What, telling you that you can't smoke?
Well, no,
It's still doing that.
I can't stand that, of course, but also just the pilot having their little 15 minutes of fame.
Oh, please. I don't even remember aeroplane announcements. I'd love to hear some aeroplane announcements.
Really, yeah.
Show off. I'd love some aeroplane announcements.
That's right.
I like it on Ryanair flights, they play music when you land successfully. Like, this is a job well done. We should all be very happy. And everybody applauds. And
Pleasantly surprised that we landed? No, of course, I love Ryanair and I do travel with them a lot. But look, I mean, it's clearly, I agree, not exclusively motivated by the desire for us to have quiet journeys. Now, following the Prime Minister's apology for a Downing Street party at PMQs earlier this week, etiquette experts have laid out the best way to apologise, which include never saying the word if and never trying to shift the blame. Let's take a look and see how the PM's apology measures up.
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise. I know that millions of people across this country have made extraordinary sacrifices over the last 18 months. I know the anguish that they have been through, unable to mourn their relatives, unable to live their lives as they want, or to do the things they love. And though I cannot anticipate the conclusions of the current inquiry, I have learned enough to know that there were things we simply did not get right.
Power through the... Brilliant stuff. Well, other big apologies don't. That's right. If you're trying to apologise properly, then you should not accuse others or make excuses. The etiquette expert also advises sending a note. So what do we think? Without getting into the detail of Partygate, we've heard your strong views on that one already, Rebecca Jane. But what makes for a good apology? If someone has done wrong by you, what do you want to hear from them?
Well, absolutely correct. You don't want to be hearing the words if, you don't want to be hearing the words but. You want them to do a wholehearted, I am sorry, this is why I am sorry, and I got it wrong. You take full and wholehearted responsibility, which my favourite person of the moment does not do.
Yeah, I mean, Laura, I think also, and I've had to apologise plenty of times in my life, I think that to say that you will make sure this doesn't happen again, I think that goes a long way to, look, I will reflect on why I behaved in this way, and I will make every effort never to repeat this.
Yeah, that's easy. Let's just not lock down again, and then he can't do it again.
Well, exactly.
I think what's difficult, though, is he's obviously got to be careful not to be legally implicated and professionally implicated, and so it kind of holds back the
Politicians
full...
never properly apologise.
It holds back the full force of an apology, but having two sons less than 2 years apart, we've done lots of apology practice in our house, and what she said, no ifs and buts, it should be wholehearted.
Benedict, briefly, if you can, sorry seems to be the hardest word.
You could try not being wrong.
That would help. That would help. But broadly, listen, I bet you know you're like one of the nicest, most circumspect people I know. You're a very rare thing. You're a straight-up, honest journalist. But if you had to apologise, how would you do it?
I'd probably buy somebody a very large bottle of alcohol, but not actually say anything. Or, a box of chocolates or something like that, and I'd just leave it there, and then I'd just leave the room, because I think I'd probably struggle with admitting that I was in the wrong.
Bottle of something, that'll go a long way. Brilliant work. Who knew? Now, Millie the Jack Russell, who was missing from her home in Portsmouth for 2 days, was saved from dangerous mud flats by using a sausage attached to a drone. That's right, you've got a drone with a sausage hanging off it. The extraordinary operation to save Millie involved dangling the sausage in front of Millie and using it to guide her to safety. It was all done by the Solent Coast Guard and volunteers from Denmead Drone Search and Rescue. So glad that she's been recovered. What an absolute sweetie she is. Probably now sleeping on the couch at home. Well, lots more to get through. It's time for this. We're going to play the Great British Game Show. Tonight we're celebrating the life of the rock legend Meat Loaf, who sadly died at the age of 74. What an artist, what a legend, what a singer, what a composer. Tributes have poured in from around the world. Well, since Meat Loaf was so important to the rock genre, we're going to be guessing in this game which rock legend carried out the bad behaviour that I will describe as follows. So you at home and my viewers, my listeners on DAB+, and my panellists have got to guess which rocker was responsible for this outrageous behaviour. We'll start with question number 1. Who bit the head off a bat and snorted ants on stage? Come on.
Meat Loaf.
No,
it's Ozzy Osbourne.
It was Ozzy Osbourne.
I'm going to get all of these wrong. I'm sorry.
No, you're all right. Ozzy Osbourne. The points go there to Benedict. How about question number 2? Which rock star threw a Rolls Royce into a pool?
Threw or drove? How big?
I think he drove it in. Forgive me, I think he drove it. I have correction from Lorna. He drove the thing. He rolled it in.
Rolls-Royce. Jagger.
It was not. It was a Keith, though.
Don't ask me.
Keith Richards.
Keith, the other great rock legend, Keith Moon.
Who?
That's Keith Moon, an icon of British rock. How about this one? Of course, you know what? Rebecca Jane wouldn't know. She's so young. Okay. Question number 3: Who ran completely naked through a golf course and took a maid from the resort as a human shield? It ran through a golf course, took a maid. What's a maid, by the way? I guess
Is it somebody from Motorhead?
Yeah, a little bit. No, it was Slash. There he is.
As in an actual person. So the person is a human. Well, we've all done that, haven't we?
Not a good idea. Don't try that at home. Question number 4: Who smoked and snorted their own father's, wait for it, ashes?
Was that Marilyn Manson?
No, we are back to the Bee Gees. Not the Bee Gees. The Rolling Stones.
Good Lord.
No, the Bee Gees are very, very... They were very clean living, and Barry Gibb still is. It's a Rolling Stone.
It's a Rolling Stone. It's not Jagger, is it?
Keith Richards.
It's Keith Richards.
Who held their child out of a window? Who dangled their kid out of a window?
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson. Well done, Rebecca Jane.
Yes.
Who bit the head off a chicken?
Who are these people that bite the heads off things?
It's a man with a woman's name. Very 2022.
Is that Marilyn
Manson?
Cooper. Alice Cooper. How about this one? Which rock star told a member of staff to do something about the windy weather outside his hotel room? Think of the ultimate rock diva. Big glasses, tantrums and tiaras.
I think it's a good idea.
Sir Elton John. And which rock star got so drunk he didn't know he had a second night on stage? Liam Gallagher. A true legend. My thanks to my amazing team. I'll see you tomorrow at 9, but we're here with headliners in 2 minutes.
Good evening. It's not as cold out there this evening as yesterday because there's more cloud around. That cloud is going to make for quite a grey weekend for most of us, but a few spots will continue to see a bit of sunshine, and most of us are not going to see any rain thanks to this area of high pressure that's been ambling across the country for the past couple of days and will stick around for much of next week. There are weather fronts approaching the far northwest and across the Highlands, the Western Isles. There will at times be some drizzly rain, certainly through this evening and overnight, but for most it is a dry night, but with a lot of cloud. Still some breaks in the cloud across eastern England, parts of the south, and where those breaks persist, a touch of frost is still going to happen, but for most towns and cities, warmer than last night, that cloud acting like a blanket and keeping temperatures above freezing. That cloud, though, is obviously going to blot out the sun for most of us during Saturday. Parts of eastern England, northeast Scotland, and across parts of the south will see some breaks in the cloud and a bit of sunshine. That cloud, though, quite thick across the Highlands, Argyll and Bute, with some rain at times here. Otherwise, though, most of us will be dry. Temperatures a little higher than today's values, 7, 8. Top temperatures probably northern Scotland, where we could reach 11 or 12 with a bit of brightness, say Caithness and Sutherland or the Moray Firth. Still some patchy rain across the Highlands, the Western Isles during Saturday evening, but elsewhere, if you're heading out tomorrow evening, it should be dry, but again, it will be fairly cloudy. Again, a few pockets of frost possible on Sunday morning, and again, during the day, we'll see a few breaks in the cloud, maybe parts of East Wales, northeast England, northeast Scotland, so some blue sky here. Otherwise, most of us just rather glum but dry. The main exception to that dry weather again, the far northwest, where there'll be some rain and drizzle over the Highlands. Quite breezy all weekend across the northwest, those winds strengthening further on Sunday. Temperatures again 8, 9, 10 Celsius. At times weather fronts will push into the far north, but for most high pressure hangs on even into next week, keeping things largely dry.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation.